I'm Elizabeth and this is Table for 11. Today we'll be making dinner rolls. This is my own recipe. I've made it for about 15 years and it's been tweaked over the years. Now I make it, it's the equivalent of 4 loaves of bread and it will make you about 2 dozen baseball size rolls. I make this for all kinds of things, as slider buns, as hamburger buns, as actual loaves of bread, but most often just as dinner rolls, and we either eat them with a meal or we make them into little sandwiches. They're a very soft dinner roll. It's a rich dough. It's the kind of roll that you would have with Thanksgiving dinner, or make a toasted sandwich out of. It's not quite a brioche because it doesn't have eggs, but it is a rich dough. It has butter and milk. All the liquid is milk. We're going to start, and I will say that you can do this by hand. I've done that many times. It's an easy dough to knead. It's a forgiving dough as well. If you need to do it by hand, you would mix the ingredients just loosely in a bowl, dump it out onto a floured board or counter, and knead it for probably about 10 minutes if you were kneading by hand. We're going to start with 10 cups of flour. Add the flour. And the flour I'm using, I have no affiliation with King Arthur flour, but I am using their all-purpose flour today. That's my favorite flour far and away. It works great for bread, for cookies. It's a higher protein flour than most all-purpose flours are. They also make a bread flour, but I've actually found that for most of my recipes that has too high of a protein content. You get too much gluten development and it's hard to knead and you get kind of a dense loaf. So I like their all-purpose flour for most everything aside from pastry. It has too much protein for pastry and you can't get that crumbliness. The pastry turns out a little too chewy. So the liquid ingredients, this is 4 cups plus 4 tablespoons of milk. And I'm using a regular whole cow's milk. I've done this with almond milk, with soy milk, macadamia nut milk, and oat milk. It doesn't really matter what milk you do. You'll get a little better body to the rolls. They'll have a richer taste if you use cow's milk, in my experience, but any milk will be just fine. To the milk, I've added 2 tablespoons of honey. This is a local Manitoba honey. We are a U.S. military family stationed here in Canada, and I like to get local honey every time that we move because I find that for seasonal allergies, if you're eating local raw honey, it kind of gives you just a little bit of the pollen from the area and helps to desensitize you from the allergens that are there. On top of this, there's 4 teaspoons of active dry yeast. This is my yeast. I buy it 2 pounds at a time. And if you have instant yeast instead of active dry yeast, that's fine. You don't need to bloom it. Blooming is putting it on top of warm, like bathwater temperature milk, about 102 degrees. And that would be, let's see, Celsius. I'm still learning the metric system because I didn't grow up with it and we've only lived here a few years. That would be mid-30s, I think about 37 degrees Celsius. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're going to sprinkle the yeast on top, and it's going to bloom until it starts to look puffy, at least around the edges. It takes about 5 minutes. We will pour that in. Then add the salt. You can, you don't really have to use the salt if you don't want to, if you want it to be lower sodium. I usually put about 1.5 teaspoons of salt in there. And then the last ingredient, you could also skip if you want. It's not necessary. We're going to do about 5 to 6 tablespoons of butter. If it's for an everyday thing, you can skip the butter. If it's for a special occasion, you can add a little more, make it a little richer. These rolls do get butter on top to keep the crust soft. So there will be a little bit more butter added later. You can also add, this is just a softened butter, but you can also add melted butter. It'll work just fine. So I'm going to start kneading this. This is actually my everyday mixer because I'm baking for so many people. I also have a regular 5-quart KitchenAid that I use for smaller recipes, but I found that as we had more kids, that I was having to make the same recipe twice because it wouldn't fit in the bowl of the regular KitchenAid mixer. And I have this one. It's also a commercial mixer. It has a stainless steel dough hook, which you can get for the smaller mixers, but they don't come with it. They normally come with the powder coated ones and the aluminum whisk. I prefer the stainless steel whisk because you can put it in the dishwasher without it discoloring. This will take, it's going to need at least 5 minutes to knead. If you have a heavy duty mixer, it'll take a little bit less. If you want, which I sometimes do, especially if I'm making a half recipe in a smaller mixer, and the mixer starts to struggle as the dough gets thicker, as that gluten is built up. You can mix it for a while in the mixer and then put it out on your board and knead it by hand to finish it off. I'll do that today just to demonstrate it. It's like I said, it's a very forgiving dough, and after we're done mixing it, we'll go through this now because we gotta wait. We're going to put it in a bowl. In that bowl, we're going to oil the bowl. You can use any neutral oil. I'm using avocado oil. Anything would work, literally anything. Oh, and about the oil in the bread, if you're looking for the bread to be vegan, you can use coconut oil in lieu of the butter. Or you can just leave the butter out altogether, although it does add a lot. So you want the oil to be at least partway up the sides because your dough is going to rise and you don't want it to stick to the bowl. Like I said, I've used olive oil, grapeseed oil, even just vegetable oil. And then we're going to get a cloth to cover it with. You want to use, when you're covering bread dough, you want to use a lint-free towel. And these are often called tea towels. The main thing is that you do not use a terry cloth type fabric. You can get tea towels as a waffle print, like a waffle texture, or a smooth one like this. These are actually, I use these for this specific purpose. These are cloth diapers. This is a bird's eye fabric. It was never used as a diaper, but that's what the fabric is. And we also have our everyday cleaning cloths, like our unpaper towels, are the same bird's eye fabric. This is a double layer fabric. It washes up really well. It's 100% cotton, and I can't recommend those enough. I think we use, even with 11 of us, we use maybe a roll of paper towels every couple of weeks. I'm going to dampen this. If it's the middle of winter like it is now, you might have to re-dampen the cloth while it's rising, but you might not. It really depends on where you live and how humid it is. If you're in a humid place, like we've been stationed in the deep south before, and I never had to re-moisten the towel. So this is about done. You can tell the mixer is starting to strain under the weight of the dough, or the force needed to mix it. It's still going a bit. I think we're going to call this good. normally do this backwards. I'm going to undo the hook and pop it off. Sorry, that was probably very loud. So was that. Take the hook out. And I don't think I need to knead this anymore. I was going to try to. So this is it. It's this uses several pounds of flour. It's a lot of dough. Like I said, it's a very easy recipe to cut in half. So I'm just going to form this into a ball. And I'm going to put it into the bowl top side down. I'm going to swirl that oil around so it gets all over and flip it over. And I'm going to take my tea towel and I'm going to cover it. And we're going to let this rise. If it's a cool room, like my house in Canada in the winter, it's going to take a few hours. It's going to take 2.5 hours. You can also do an even cooler rise. You can let it rise overnight in the refrigerator and take it out for about an hour before you continue. That'll give it a bit of a sourdough taste, which you may or may not want. What I normally do is I put it in the oven. This is a rental house, but we are very fortunate to have a nice oven here. And our wall oven has a bread-proof setting. It only takes about an hour, sometimes a little bit longer, for this amount of dough to rise, which is pretty quick. And I'm gonna go over to the oven and get out one that I made earlier today. My towel is still damp, which is great. Like I said, we're gonna get about 24 rolls out of this. It's okay if you wanna make them smaller. I do that a lot, especially for slider rolls. We are going to deflate this. You can punch it down if you really want to. Get it off the sides of the bowl. Take a handful. You can weigh it. Use a bench scraper to separate out pieces of dough and weigh it to get exactly the same for everyone, but I don't bother. We're going to form them into rolls, and you'll put them better part of an inch apart. We'll say 3/4 of an inch apart on the tray. They are going to puff up quite a bit in their second rise. And we'll just keep doing this. I won't do them all because it'll just take too long. Once we've gotten all of these formed and on the tray, you can also do this, especially if you're doing a half recipe, in a 9x13 glass dish, and they'll just kind of bump up against the sides of the dish. And I actually like that because it keeps them nice and soft, and the kids prefer that. When you do them on a sheet pan like this, you're looking more at the sides being a little crisper, which is okay. So we're going to, after they bake, after they do a second rise and bake, immediately out of the oven, they either get brushed with melted butter or rubbed with a stick of butter. And that is what keeps them that super soft dinner roll texture. I don't really like when the dinner rolls have a crunchy top crust. You can also add, you could use a lime, and you could slash the tops of these. You could put seeds on them. My husband's military, so we don't use poppy seeds. They can lead to artificially positive drug testing, so we don't even keep them in the house. We don't buy anything with them. You could put sesame seeds, particularly if you're making these as hamburger buns. If you are making it as a hamburger bun, what I usually do when I'm forming it is I spread it out a little bit as I'm curling the edges over, and I would let it rise more like this instead of being that bubble shape that I do for a dinner roll or a slider roll. And the sesame seeds work nicely on the hamburger buns. Although when you do that, you have to be very careful putting the butter on afterwards, or you're going to knock all your sesame seeds off. So I'm getting there with this. I'm going to set it aside. We're going to let this rise for, like I said, anywhere from an hour to 2 hours, sometimes longer, depending on the temperature of your kitchen. It also depends on how much sweetener you used. You can use the honey. That's what I like. I like the flavor of the honey. But you can also use sugar. You can use maple syrup. You can use agave syrup, coconut sugar. Really, anything will work for this. I've used all different things. I like the maple if I'm making little breakfast sandwiches out of it. It doesn't give a huge amount of flavor, but it gives just enough so you have that taste of it. And we have a lot of maple syrup up here in the true north. So I'm just about done here. I'm going to cover these back up, let them rise, and then they will bake at 350 degrees for about 30 to 40 minutes. A lot of that depends on how big you make the rolls, and if you have them on a sheet pan or in a glass pan, the glass is less conductive. It takes more time to get up to temperature. I do recommend that you bake them in the lower third of your oven. I found that when I have them higher up, the top's brown before the bottoms get fully baked. They also work well as garlic knots. You can roll them out and literally roll them out and knot them along with garlic and olive oil, either garlic powder or I prefer the minced garlic. You can do them that way. You can also just have them as knots, just to be fun. We're gonna cover these up, and that is all there is to these soft dinner rolls. Thanks for watching.